Thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is our first reading series event of the semester. We have a lot planned. We're very excited, and we're so excited that Natalie Shapero is here to kick it all off for us. Our editor, David Lynn, will be introducing her in a moment, but I would like to point out some events that are coming up very soon, and I hope you will mark your calendars. All of this is on our reading series webpage. But I just wanted to point you toward next Tuesday. Michael Crowley will be here from Denison. He has a book out, Any Other Place. It's a collection of short stories. And then we have a celebration connected to the 50 years of women at Kenyon coming up February 11th. Caitlin Horrocks, who graduated in 2002, will be here. She wrote the novel Vexations. And the poet Allison Joseph, who's written too many books for me to mention, is also going to be here with her, and she's a graduate from 1988. So please note that. I will tell you, the Crowley reading will be in here, but the one with Caitlin Horrocks and Allison Joseph is going to be in Brandy Hall. So normally we're in here, but please note that that's going to be a different location. But they are both at 4:30, so mark your calendars. And I'll announce other ones that are further down the way as the time approaches. But now I will let David Lynn introduce.
Time to turn these off, please. It's great fun and wonderful to welcome Natalie Shapero home to Kenyon and to Gambier. I hope she realizes that we're really good at Kenyon in packing poetry readings even on a Thursday afternoon, but we don't get crowds like this from mere mortals. So Natalie first joined us as a Peter Taylor Fellow in the Summer Writers Workshop in 2007, was that right? 2007. Anna Dupree was reminding me that, a lot of readings in the summer, a lot of stuff, a lot of noise, things going on. And after Natalie read the first couple lines of a poem, the room went dead silent and remained that way for the rest of the reading. Natalie has a MFA from Ohio State and a JD from Chicago, and is now at Tufts, where she's professor of the practice of poetry. Her most recent poetry collection is Hard Child, Copper Canyon 2017. Am I allowed to tell them the good news?
Sure.
Her third book will be out next year, also from Copper Canyon, which is as good as it gets. And we're excited. She has an incredible poem in the current issue of New York Review of Books. Yeah. So have a look at that, because it's really something. And it's the Hard Child was shortlisted for the International Griffin Poetry Prize. Her previous collection, No Object, received the Great Lakes College Association New Writers Award. Natalie's writing has appeared in the New Yorker, the New York Times Magazine, Poetry, and elsewhere. And she is the recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, a Ruth Lilly Fellowship, and, oh yes, a Kenyon Review Fellowship. Welcome home.
Thanks, David, and hi, this is so nice. I love Kenyon, and I can't stay away, and this is why, because it's just like a giant gathering of amazing writers and thinkers who love writing and thinking, and it brings a tear to my eye. So it's really nice to see you all here and to be in this room with everyone, and I just KR is very special in my heart, so I'm very grateful to be here. I have a little Kenyon trivia. So I'm going to read the first poem in my book, Hard Child, and there is a trivia question in this poem that is both asked and answered, and it came from when I was doing my Kenyon Review Fellowship. I was at VI Trivia. On a young faculty trivia team. We were destroyed. And we didn't know the answer to this question, but I was like, I'll put that in a poem. Make the best of it. And it's called My Hand and Cold. Of surgeons putting their knives to erroneous body parts, stories abound. So can you really blame my neighbor for how, heading into the operation, he wrote across his good knee, "Not this knee." The death of me, I'm never half so bold. You will feel, the doctor said, my hand in cold, and I thought of the pub quiz question, which 3 countries are entirely inside of other countries? I bought the bound 1,000 names for baby, made 2 lists. One if she's born breathing, one if not. The second list was longer, so much that I might call her, if she were never to bear the name, never to turn to it, suffer shaming, mull its range and implications, blame it, change it, move away, to San Marino, Vatican City, Lesotho. Hard child. So I had 2 lists of names for a girl, so what? The president's allowed to have 2 speeches, in case the hostage comes home in a bag. The geese in the metro park don't want for breadcrumbs, despite the signs proclaiming the land provides them all they need. I was a hard child, by which I mean I was callous from the start. Even now, were I to find myself after a grand disease or blast among the pasty scattering of survivors, there isn't one human tradition I would choose to carry forward. Not marking feast days, not assembling roadside shrines, not marrying up, not researching the colloquialism Staten Island divorce, not representing paste pearls as the real things, not recounting how the advent of photography altered painting and soured us on the acrylic portrait and thrust us toward the abstract, sent us seeking to capture in oil that which film would never be wasted on, umbrella stands, unlovely grates, assorted drains, body casts. I typically hate discussing the past and treasure the option, rarer and rarer, to turn from it, as when Kay's twins were born and one of them nearly died. I don't even remember which, that's how much they got better. Absence, that which never stops appearing. A sea-bound creature once believed to be a single body is actually 1,000 small fish stuck together and sucking. You'll never hear me disparage this arrangement, being myself composed in haste and subject to uncoupling. I too am put together to come apart. A bird screams out my window, like an alarm I have set to notify me when a bird is there. I cannot say what everyone means when they emphasize that the faulty ring on the Challenger cost $900 only. I never wanted to be an astronaut. I never asked for any stretch of sky to die in. I'd rather go here in the beachhead's gristle or tucked in tunnel vent. I just haven't done it yet. And I know I frustrate God, who built me for endings and never says anything but, "You had one job!" That's my God impression. Not horses. What I adore is not horses, with their modern domestic lifespan of 25 years. What I adore is a bug that lives only one day, especially if it's a terrible day. A day of train derailment, or chemical leak, or cop admits to cover-up. A day when no one thinks of anything else, least of all that bug. I know how it feels, born as I've been into these rotting times, as into sin. Everybody's so busy, so distraught they forget to kill me, and even that won't keep me alive. I make my home not with horses, but with a little dog, who sees poorly at dusk and menaces stumps, makes her muscle known to every statue. I wish she could have one single day of language, so that I might reassure her. Don't be afraid. Our whole world is dead, and so can do you no harm. This is something that I think about all the time. If my dog could understand human language for just like a short period of time, what would I like to say to her? And then the main thing is I will be right back. That's what I would use it for. This is another dog poem. It's kind of like, if you know that thing sometimes when a domestic animal is you take the collar off and everyone's like, oh, he's naked. I don't like that. It's called Bath or Escape. After a bath or escape, the dog stands newly without his collar, and everyone coos, "Oh, he's naked," as though he weren't on full display before. This sheer unbrokenness of exposure, he's not the only one. They taught us to say, "Pinch me," at a moment of elation to ensure we weren't dreaming. But I have never said, "Pinch me," never blurred my luck with a good dream, as I've never dreamt of good things, only battle cries and cavern fights and me unarmed and snarled in my slips. You know, I have to dress this way. I work for tips. Teacup this. To my young daughter, I sing the songs my mother sang to me. Which is to say, to my young daughter, I sing a bizarre selection of breakup tunes of the 60s and 70s. I should have known you'd bid me farewell. There's a lesson to be learned in this, and I learned it very well. Now I know you're not the only starfish in the sea. If I never hear your name again, it's all the same to me. That does not seem right to sing to a baby. Yet here I am, and here she is, bed-sprawled, unblessed, and so perhaps like the starfish, yes, one creature of more than the world requires, as I am consistently reminded by pamphlet mandates, blanket labels, alerts to lay her always up, is awful to be a person. That's why from my lovers I've always demanded to know what kind of a dog I might be, were I ever a dog. And don't say teacup this, toy that. Don't pick a dog that must travel around and stuffed in a bag like a filthy magazine. Don't take it lightly when I say, of all the men I've been with, there are only a few I never would allow to hold my child. I consider this a triumph. 10 what? I had this idea. I remembered hearing people kind of say this adage, the camera adds 10 pounds. And I was like, oh, that'd be kind of like an interesting thing to play off of for my poetry. And so I was like walking around just what could I put in there instead? Like the camera adds 10 what? And I never thought of anything, so this poem is called 10 What? The camera adds 10 what? I can't remember, but the threat's enough to make me stay away. I don't want any more of what I have. I don't want another spider plant. I don't want another lover. Especially I don't want another clock, except insofar as each of us is a clock, all hammers and counting down. And yes, I know by heart the list of lifetimes. A worker bee will die before a camel. A fox will die before a pilot whale. The pocket watch will die before the clock inside the crocodile. I think of this often, but never tell my lover, as I do not tell him that upstairs a moth is trapped by the window sash. I make no plan to free it. Everyone says the baby looks like me, but I can't see it. The sky. Whatever I care for, someone else loves it more, deserves it more. The doe with her whole mouth crushing the flocks, or the seer who adores my future, whereas I could take it or leave it. I know I'll disappear. It won't be glamorous. It won't be like when the Mona Lisa was stolen and the tourists all lined up to pay their respects at the empty spot on the wall of the Louvre. I've never actually even seen the sky. I've only ever seen effluence, seen wattage. The only night I remember is the dinner of neighbors at which a man I never had met before said, I don't fear dying. Look at the past. People have been dying forever. And then he stopped and shook his head. I drank too much, he said. I was almost saying that people have been dying forever and all of them survived. But of course, he made a hard laugh. God, of course they didn't survive. So that's some poems from that book. Is this sign here that says breathe for everyone or just for me? Okay, cool. That's kind of you to protect. And I'm going to read some poems from my new manuscript that is coming out before too long. It used to be called Man at His Bath, which is the name of a painting by Gustave Caillebotte. But I kept saying it to people, and they kept saying, man at what? So the title of the book is now Popular Longing, but this poem is still kind of the keystone poem of the book. So I will read it first. Man at His Bath. 6 years ago, the big museum bought 8 famous paintings. I'm sorry, that's not correct. I'm going to start over. 6 years ago, the big museum sold 8 famous paintings to purchase for unspecified millions Gustave Caillebotte's Man at His Bath. Now it's hip to have a print of it. And whenever I see one hung for decoration, I'm almost certain that this is what Caillebotte had in mind when he broke out the oils in 1884. Some 21st century bitch in Boston catching a glimpse of a framed reproduction, recollecting a study about how washing oneself may induce a sense of culpability. What I remember is he insisted I clean before leaving. That, and he was trying to be dreamlike. He took my jaw in his hand and said, "In the next life, we'll really be together." And the clamp in his voice made me almost certain he knew something I did not. So now I eat right, train hard, get my shots. This life, I'm angling to remain in this life as long as I can. Being almost certain, as I am, what's after. My hair is my thing. The symphony's out of money again, and no wonder. All those violins, the twisted strands and sponges, who could not think of torture? Last week, I read a novel about a man so awful that when he died, I wept because it was fiction. I wanted it to be real, to watch him really die, and I wanted you to die also, and to be feted with a lengthy organza-filled funeral, so that I could make a big show of blowing it off. I decided to go out and get a tattoo of your funeral with me not there. But apparently it's illegal here to tattoo a person who's crying. The trend now is to be interred with beloved possessions. Pearl-trimmed gun, gold watch, whatever you got. Some people recoil at the waste of this, but not me. These confused little objects of wealth, they are disgusting. I just pray we have earth and shovels enough. I pray we have bodies enough to bury them all. This poem is about the High Line in New York City. I read an article sort of advancing the theory that when you are walking on the High Line, which is like the kind of the rail trail, that you are a consumption good for the people who live in the condos above it. And it's also a poem about when is it acceptable to use the word daylight. It's called The Lone Acceptable Application of Daylight. The lone acceptable application of daylight is in the expression, put a little daylight between you and what's troubling, set out moving, distance yourself from the pharaonic shade of the household names and the power couples. The quality of cloud in one locale or another, solace of the contrail noon. Who cares? Why even look up when all you see is people looking down? Their grapefruit juice on the balcony, their news, their delight at the sight of us. We entertain them. We kiss and spin and strike. We're always changing. They like it when we fight. I'll knock the living... Daylight. Sun shower. Okay, so this poem is based on a real list of different kind of regional and around the world expressions for the weather phenomenon of a sun shower. Like, does anyone know any expressions for a sun shower? Yeah.
There's something about the fox is giving birth.
I have heard that one. The fox is giving birth. Yeah.
The devil's beating his wife.
The devil is beating his wife is the first one. Yeah. So a few of these are real and mostly not real. Sun shower. Some people say the devil is beating his wife. Some people say the devil is pawing his wife. Some people say the devil is doubling down on an overall attitude of entitlement toward the body of his wife. Some people say the devil won't need to be sorry, as the devil believes that nothing comes after this life. Some people say that in spite of the devil's public, long-standing, and meticulously logged disdain for the health and wholeness of his wife, the devil spends all day, every day, insisting grandly and gleefully on his general pro-woman ethos. That the devil truly considers himself to be an unswayed crusader, effortlessly magnetic, scrupulous, gracious, and, in spite of the devil's several advanced degrees, a luminous autodidact. Some people say, calm down, this is commonplace. Some people say, calm down, this is very rare. Some people say the sun is washing her face. Some people say in hell they're having a fair. Some toxin. This is what we get. This is the penance for extending and extending the human lifespan. Now, some people live 120 years, but those years are increasingly spent being bombarded by adorable profiles of the oldest people. Interviews about what keeps them ticking. The secret is always some toxin, like bacon or vodka. And the joke that ensues is also always the same. The chemicals preserved him. That is fine. But just once I would like to uncrumple the metro section and find that the key to long life is rage and trauma. That bitterness girds the organs in equal measure. If I could choose to be born in any era, I would opt to predate these science lives. There's just so much violence, always. It's better to have it visited on you back when your attackers would end up dead much sooner. When you would die sooner, too. All I want is for someone to understand me. But it seems my keenest friends and I, we've scattered. We've struggled for peace and permanence, and somehow in that struggle we've ventured far from each other. And this is what we get. This is the penance. Back when even the powerful died younger, they would lose one another and dutifully wait to be reunited in heaven. We wait for that still, but now in the absence of heaven. We say, someday we'll find each other, year after year on earth. And I'm gonna close this out with 3 poems about California and 1 poem about Pennsylvania. Yeah. And then if you want to chat or whatever, let's do that. The first poem about California is called, does anyone want to guess the title?
California.
Yes, California. California. But it's pronounced like this. California. We often ate late by flameless candles and took turns choosing how best to be disposed of. I want to be buried. I want everyone to be buried. I realize there's scarcely a spare acre left in the ground, but I just can't do without the indecorous transit from parlor to plot. I need that array of daytime headlights jolting the arid access road, the only remembrance that matters. Don't make a speech. For years I would wonder whether the man who attacked me, in his memory did the event of it persist as a dull sort of flash. And then he died and became himself a flash in the mind of the world. And now I wonder, is he anywhere? I don't believe in hell, and also I don't believe in nothing, so that leaves only heaven. I have a couple questions. It is my understanding that the weather in heaven has only a single setting, which is pleasant. I haven't spent real time in California, but friends of mine who've moved there say it's very difficult, absent the changing of the seasons, to remember when things took place. With reference to always the lodgepole pine and the low-bent needlegrass, you get confused. Dates, sequences, even the people involved. You can almost imagine the whole thing was somebody else. A space to train and exit. Maybe California is just plain easier with the commonness of outbuildings. Raw-looking cedar or sheet metal walls and a runnel of sun getting in through the roof seams. Position the heavy bag, tighten the eye bolt, 25 right hooks. Or pull up a chair and compose your suicide note. A space to train and exit. The purpose of having a body at all is to practice the keeping alive of domestic animals and of plants. You dispense to yourself some minerals and some water. You expose yourself to the sun, and it helps you remember to do the same for those in your charge. If you could equip them with all they require, or else make them require nothing at all, you wouldn't need your body at all. The suggested face for sorry. You and me, we are the opposite of twins in an old story. When I am in pain, you do not feel it. If I up and retch, you never guess. The city laid out poison along the tunnels and tracks meant for rats, and one day my dog ate some. She was fine. I've never been so jealous in my life. I want to do the things we do to die and then just take off sprinting in the steep ravine. In my dream, I walk my dog, and you cross our path, and she torques at you and rears and snaps. She senses you are wholly bad. They say animals can tell. It's like with earthquakes. You're supposed to scan the classifieds, searching for a sudden spike in the number of missing pets, and that's how you know to prepare. Maneuver away from shelving. Crawl to the nearest door frame. Get out of California. What are you waiting for? And this is the last poem. It's also the last poem in my new book. It's called Pennsylvania. And hey, thanks so much everyone for coming to this reading. This is like a really beautiful room, and I keep looking out and seeing people I very much care for, and it's so distracting. Wouldn't trade it. Pennsylvania. Other children, when I was a child, would at times invoke the inner light. I misunderstood. I thought it meant God scorches within us, and God, like a torch, could go out. That was so long ago. I've since ceased my believing in death. There's no such thing. There's only a kind of brownout, the whole of the globe turning off for a moment and then shuddering back, the same as it was, except one person short. And then before long, an utter new person is born. Somebody worse. That's it.
Natalie will be happy to make up answers to your questions, but I meant to mention before that there are books for sale back there, and you should buy them all up, every last one of them.
Yeah. If you got stuff you want to talk about or question, whatever, anything. Or also, not. You could just hang out. Oh, Nancy.
Do you ever write poems about the Boston weather?
I don't know. Do you think anyone wants to read poems about the Boston weather?
I think if you wrote them.
Since I moved there, I actually write a lot of poems about rats because we have so many rats there, and it's like a huge problem, and they can eat through the metal bottom of the municipal garbage can.
Oh.
Yeah. So. There
question. Can you talk about how you shape each book? I mean, how, are they sort of, do you have an idea that sort of runs through the poems, or does it emerge?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my experience has been different for each book. That like this book, I was really like I want the first half of it to be about pregnancy and the second half to be about raising an infant, and it has like a chronological trajectory to it that also tries to go back to the beginning all the time. But I think that that has not been the case for me other times. And sometimes it's more about just kind of thematic, or about a surprise of things switching themes. But I'm interested in doing callbacks and having poems that refer to earlier poems without having the poem make no sense in the absence of the earlier poem. And I think this is like a larger thing that a lot of us do, and maybe you all do when you're writing poems, is it's a version of breaking the line and having the initial line stand on its own, but also mean something in conjunction with what comes after it. And it's just, it's like an interesting puzzle to try to do that.
So what would you say the themes of your second and third book were?
Well, like the theme of the, I think the theme of the book that I just finished is in part about not talking about anything and speaking awkwardly and stumbling. And that's why I like poetry, because you talk about, I think I realized I'm into it because you talk about stuff by talking about other stuff, and that's actually the main way that it's not just the way that the poems proceed structurally, but also it's what they are about, and just weird pockets of silence. Yeah, and art museums, very expensive paintings I'm very interested in.
Your cadence and delivery is so great when you're reading your poetry. Do you find that when you're writing, you're thinking simultaneously about what it's going to sound like out loud?
Yeah. I write mostly out loud, which is very convenient, because you can be like washing the dishes or doing something else. But yeah, I mean, like I kind of came up in poetry writing in meter, and so you have to always be saying like, how does it sound and how does it sound? And I don't write in a strict meter anymore, but I do use a lot of iambic pentameter phrasing, which is a way to, like, this is like my hot tip. It's a way to like make music in a poem basically by cheating and using a prefab musical phrase. Yeah.
Do you read your poems to Frankie?
No.
What do you think, like, as she gets older, like, what do you think her relationship will be like to that book?
Yeah, it's a good question. Frankie's my kid. Jazz is my old neighbor.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I should say your daughter.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that like it's like anything else where I'm not like, I think you don't want to push it on a kid, but you also don't want to hide it if they're interested in it. Mm-hmm. Right now, all she's interested in is the Skywalker saga of Star Wars. So,
Solid.
Yeah.
Oh, kind of follow up. Like, how old is she? I don't know if that's your dad.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, she's 6.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you write out loud. So do you use like a voice recording app, or do you just like have a good memory?
No, I have to remember it. And I think of that as like the test, where if I forget it, then it's probably not that good. Yeah. Yeah.
When you're writing in iambic pentameter, do you afterwards distort it or disrupt it to make it sound conversational, or do you keep it?
No, I kind of try to mess it up a little bit. And I think it's like I heard a comedian say that his like strategy for joke telling was kind of to make like a Seinfeld type joke that's very sort of like clean and punchy, but then like stumble in the middle of it, and I think about that a lot. Yeah.
How would you mess it up?
Sometimes through just like having something that's kind of in an arch diction, and then having a really like weird idiomatic part, or writing something that sounds like the way that you would normally phrase something, and then following it with a quick thing that sounds bizarre or off, like a mistake. I'm thinking about it a lot because I've been doing. I got back like the manuscript of my new book with the copy edits, and I realized how like the copy edits were really good, but the editor flagged everything that sounded weird, and she was like very attentive to what the idiom of the book was, and I think she was flagging it because other parts, like the thing that came before it, sounded non-weird, and I was like, oh yeah, is that what I'm doing? Just like a regular thing and then a weird thing and then a regular thing and then a weird thing, and just like stet.
How would you suggest incorporating, like if you've written poems, incorporating that poetry in like your normal life? And besides like the classic publishing and whatnot, like how would you go about that? How
to just like live a life and write poems?
More of like, sharing poetry with other people who also write or like poetry.
Oh, I mean, this is an annoying answer, but it depends on what you want. Like, it depends on what you want. I mean, I know people who do a lot of different things, right? I know people who, go to, open mic nights and read, or I know people who have small kind of closed writing groups, or people who have open writing groups that just like meet in the library that anyone can join. I know people who put their poems on Twitter, or who make zines, or I think that like make their own broadside. I mean, there's many different ways to give your poem to someone. I don't know. It's just what do you want?
I'm thinking of like having more sciencey people be like interested in poetry, and because it rings something, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how to go about that.
So. This is my real answer. I don't know either, but I know there are people in this room who know. Yeah. Let's make some connections.
Let's have two more questions, and then you can have Natalie sign your new books for you.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the impulses that compel you to write, or the reasons why you write, have changed very much during either your career or just your life?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's hard to think about, for me at least, it's hard to think about like why am I writing? What is happening here? I'm not sure. I have to give you a no answer, or like a non-answer. But that's a really good question. But yes, I just like the question.
How do you think, if at all, like motherhood has impacted how you write, how you go about writing, what you choose to write about?
Well, I think that I wanted to write a book that was a lot about it, and once I wrote this book, I really was like, the next book is the kind of it's not going to be an aspect of the next book. So I think that it helped it expanded the different modes that I feel like I'm interested in kind of dipping in and out of. And it made me have to figure out a way to like more consistently sleep a normal sleep schedule, which I think is good for writing. Another hot tip.
Join me in thanking Natalie.